Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in this video today, we're going to be talking about how reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett, has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. This video is sponsored by Baywater Painting, by the way. More on them in a little bit. Now, I'm not going to read the entirety of the statement that Ian Rappaport posted, but to break it down, Myles Garrett wants to compete for a Super Bowl, and it is basically, it sounds like it's his understanding that he won't be competing for or winning a Super Bowl throughout the remainder of his career if he stays with the Cleveland Browns, which has opted to now request this trade Garrett has. Now, the Browns have came out and said, hey, nothing's changed. We're not trading Myles Garrett. And we've seen situations like this before where all-star caliber players have requested trades. Sometimes those guys do get traded, sometimes those guys don't get traded. And Myles Garrett, in my opinion, is one of the top 3 defensive players in the league right now. He's only 29 years old, just turned 29 years old, 6-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro, again, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year in 2023. Folks, he has 102.5 sacks in his career. Besides his rookie season, he has never had a year where he hasn't posted at least 10 sacks in his career. The dude's an absolute all-star, right? An absolute all-star. And the first question that kind of comes to mind when I think about this, before we even talk about the possibility of the Bucs trading him, is would the Buccaneers even be a desirable location for Myles Garrett, right? Do you possibly make that theory or come to a conclusion that, hey, the Bucs could compete for a Super Bowl with Myles Garrett on their roster? And you know what, man? Like, it's possible. I could see at least them being in a conversation. You get a guy like Myles Garrett, put him in a defense with guys like Vita Vea in that mix. If Levante David were to stick around for another year, you got Kalijah Kancey in there as well. That's a very decent looking defense, in my opinion. And the one thing Bucs fans have been clamoring for, myself included, has been, hey, if the Bucs just got a good pass rusher, like a true number 1 dog pass rusher, this defense could see some significant improvement, right? Just off of that one move alone. And Myles Garrett would certainly be a true dog number 1 pass rusher, right? I think that he could absolutely transform this defense to greater heights, in my opinion. Whenever you pair that up with an offense that was absolutely humming last year, doing some fantastic work, I think, yes, you could say that, like, hey, if you go out and get a guy like Myles Garrett, you would at least be like a dark horse candidate, at least be somewhere in that conversation if Josh Grizzard works out as OC and you make some other moves as well to kind of supplement the rest of your roster. I think that that could be a legitimate conversation, right? But before we continue this conversation, by the way, I do want to say real quick, shout out to the sponsor of this video in Baywater Painting, guys. Folks, Baywater Painting is servicing the Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Pasco County areas. Real quick, just to take another quick look at what they've been doing, my guy Zachary is going in. He does interior painting. He does exterior painting. He does so much fantastic work in terms of making your home look absolutely beautiful. Look at these guys just getting the work, doing the exterior painting, just doing a fantastic job of it. Just, folks, Zachary over at Baywater Painting does fantastic work. I mean, he really does. Take a look at this side of the house here. Looks fantastic, in my opinion. Fresh coat of paint, looks absolutely beautiful. Again, guys, Zachary does a fantastic job of doing exterior home painting and interior home painting as well. Again, that is in the Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Pasco County areas. Make sure you go check him out. Give Zach a call, by the way. His number is 727-479-4039. Again, that is 727-479-4039. Let him know James sent ya, and go give Baywater Painting some business, because Zachary does a fantastic job. Now, folks, back to what I was talking about regarding Myles Garrett and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Cleveland Browns, right? We've already determined that the Buccaneers could be a desirable location for Myles Garrett, right? But then start talking about compensation, okay? First things first, the Cleveland Browns have made it very adamant they don't want to move on from Myles Garrett. Guess what that does? That raises the price tag. The Browns may want to be blown away by an offer to go out and get a guy like Myles Garrett, right? The second thing you've got to consider whenever you think of a price tag is this dude's only 29 years old. If you think he's going to be a stud for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, there's 30 other fan bases that believe he's going to be a stud for their team as well. And they're right. So now you've got to consider, well, if Myles Garrett were to ever become available, almost every team, in fact, I would say just about every team in the league that isn't the Browns or the Bucs is going to be competing as well for the services of Myles Garrett. Guess what that does? Raises the price tag of what it's going to cost for Myles Garrett. I mean, I could see multiple first-round picks having to be dealt for a guy like Garrett to get a top 3 defensive player in the league in his prime at 29 years old. You got to think you may have 6-7 more years of Myles Garrett. That's going to be an expensive price tag, right? The Buccaneers don't necessarily make a lot of big-time trades like this. They just don't. I mean, yes, they traded for Rob Gronkowski. They gave a 4th-round pick to get Gronk, right? It's not like they were giving up first-round picks. I mean, the biggest trade I think we've seen in terms of giving up compensation in the Jason Light era, I think was whenever they traded a 3rd-rounder for Myles Garrett. Or not Myles Garrett, sorry. I wish. Jason Pierre-Paul. And so the Bucs do have a history of trading for pass rushers, but there's a big difference between saying, hey, we're going to trade a 3rd-rounder for Jason Pierre-Paul, and we might have to trade at least 1 first-rounder to get a guy like Garrett, right? That's a lot to ask. That's a lot to ask. And if you do really believe, hey, this guy could be the key to us getting to the Super Bowl or being going to a deep playoff run, we feel like we're a Myles Garrett away, maybe you could say, hey, why not ball? But, like, it's not in Jason Light's typical playbook. It's not typically in his wheelhouse to say, hey, we ball, we're going to be like the LA Rams, screw them picks. Let's go out and get a Myles Garrett. That's just not really how they operate. So while it could make sense from a Myles Garrett wanting to go to a competitor standpoint, and while it does make sense for the Bucs, right, more certainly makes sense for the Bucs, price tag and what it would cost to get Garrett, that's where you kind of have to pump the brakes and say it's not likely to happen. And I don't love to pour cold water on stuff like this, but and obviously anything can happen in the NFL, but to go out and get a guy like Myles Garrett to give up that much draft capital, we have not seen Jason Light do anything like that before in terms of giving up 1st or even 2nd round picks for that matter. So, and he's been here for a decade now. Not a ton of reason to see why things would possibly change now. But I suppose you never know. What do you guys think about this? Do you want to see the Buccaneers trade for Myles Garrett? What would you be comfortable giving up to bring in Garrett? Let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions about this down in the comments section below. I'd love to hear it. Guys, one more shout out to Baywater Painting. Again, Zachary does a fantastic job. He is servicing the Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Pasco County areas. Give him a call at 727-479-4039. And get your home painted, man. Get your home painted. But guys, thanks so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. As always, folks, I'll see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.